Yo, what's good? My name's Kim. Uh, Cansworld for short. That was so bad. Let me start again. Yo, what's good? It's Kim, and I'm back here with another yap sesh about things that I like in my room, alone, by myself. Again, I wanted to yap about how I feel like vintage is outdated. Well, not technically how vintage is outdated. That title pretty much is kind of like just clickbait, like clickbait essentially. How the vintage world is just slowly becoming more overplayed in a way. No, no, most definitely becoming overplayed. So again, I'm not really coming here with like some new like understanding for some topic or like just a general live by truth that everyone has to just follow. It's just me sitting in my room just yapping about things that I like, about clothes, about life, and just about fashion, and about just about me, to be honest. So yeah, let's talk. So to really start off this conversation, I really just wanted to come off with just this basic statement. I feel like is very self-explanatory, but something that a lot of people that are either diehard with vintage or a lot of people that are so overwhelmed with vintage culture, even though they just it's not their vibe really, and people that are really actually into vintage will understand what I'm saying. People unlike me, I'm not really a big vintage guy, but just because something is vintage doesn't mean it's like all like just overall better. When breaking down stuff like that, yeah, obviously there's like a general just distinction in which the quality is different in a sense. It doesn't make the garment better just because it's older. I feel like now we've gotten into like a deep spiral in which vintage clothes have just like just because you can slap vintage on top of something just because something lasted like 10, 20 years and like it probably just never been worn, you can just slap vintage on it, makes it somehow better than a lot of the clothes that are either being put out today or just better in just clothing in general. Like just because something is vintage or you can just call something vintage doesn't mean you have an overall leg up on someone. Like if me and someone else was wearing the same two pair of pants, but his was from like the 1920s and mine was from like today, it doesn't make his pants better in any way. At the end of the day, he still has to put on a good fit, and that's just generally like my own opinion on just vintage in general. I don't think just because something is older in a sense it makes something better or just makes your outfit better just because I don't know, someone's old grandma like died in it or something. I don't think that like gives you a right away in which like makes you cooler or more flyer in the fashion space. Slapping the word vintage on top of like any clothes, to be honest, has become like a quick money grab. You can probably go on Depop and you'll probably see like 20, not even 20. 20 is probably just the absolute minimum. You could probably just scroll around, close your eyes, and pick on the next like thing that you scroll on, and it probably has some type of vintage or trying to claim some type of vintage tag onto itself. And it's just the seller understanding that a lot of people bite for a lot of stuff like that because it's been such popularized in just popular culture, or at least just in fashion. I don't think like your general public people that are just getting clothes just to like look good. To be honest, they're not really itching on if this is vintage or not, or if it is. But I still think that that word vintage, especially when reselling clothes, especially on like stuff like Depop, goes like such a long way, or it's just been stretched so long that it's just like it holds less of a value now. Like everything on Depop is probably vintage, or everything on Depop is probably being labeled as vintage, and it's probably like that item has been out for like less than like 5 years. But just because someone, or just because the brand that clothing came from doesn't sell it no more, people like just slap vintage on top of it, and I don't think that's like a good way to use the word. Going more into like the brand ownership type of thing and actually conceptualizing ideas for clothing, I feel like a lot of brands have gotten to the point where they have just stretched vintage referencing this 1998 armies, this and that, where it's just everything you see online that's probably popping off from some type of brand that wants to reference vintage isn't even referencing vintage clothes anymore. They're just referencing someone else that did the reference for them, but even that person didn't even do the reference of vintage. The person that they're taking the reference from is taking another reference from someone this, then they're taking a reference from this, and then they're taking a reference to this, and then the actual person that did do all the work and did the referencing of the vintage item is the only person who actually like came out with something of substance. And that also like goes into like just the overall like atmosphere that we're in fashion. Like fashion always has its own like waves in which like one thing goes onto another, and referencing old clothes and vintage will always be its own thing. I'm not denying the fact that you can go back and actually look into the older ideas and just revamp them. I think that's life in general. You're always looking back at the old and turning it into new, in a sense. When you're referencing the same old thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you're not referencing or creating something new. You're just repeating the past, in a sense, and you're not really giving anything to your customers. There's this idea in LA fashion because everyone wants to like relate LA fashion to baby crop tee with like salvage denim and just like what, Converse or something. And yeah, cool, that's a cool little uniform for like your typical like reseller reseller at Silver Lake or whatever. But that whole atmosphere of that whole space in just LA itself and vintage clothing has been built like for years, essentially. And then you get like new people, especially like people like me. Again, I'll even toss myself. I'll toss myself into the people that I'm bashing right now, because I fall into the same trick as well. I fall into the same trends as well. You find the same simple like vintage like trope that everyone's trying to recreate, and you find yourself feeding into the same thing that I'm talking about, overplaying fashion. Oh, not overplaying fashion, overplaying vintage. And vintage doesn't even become vintage anymore if you're just always recreating it. Vintage clothes will always have its own uniqueness within it. That's why it makes it vintage. Every single century, every single year has its own vibes. Like the Renaissance from your 1920s and everything like that. But when you get to the point like we have now, and you just have a bunch of brands referencing the same reference, and it's just all cycling the same thing, the same way, then later on in the future, when people actually look back, they're not going to really have anything to even reference themselves, or even have anything to actually think of this was a central thought or a central idea in this time and this year that just translated within the clothes. It was just a bunch of people recycling the same old thing that they saw for the next. There is no originality in that. There is no actual thought process in that. Oh, and this is another bonus too. Another bonus in which why I think like vintage is, well, not really why vintage is being overplayed, but another thing, there's just one like actual genuine like dislike of vintage that I like is that vintage stinks, or like a lot of like old clothes really stink. Y'all need to start washing your vintage clothes. Not even vintage clothes. Y'all need to start washing your salvage denims and all that, bro. Please, please. I know, like, the crust and this and that. Oh, it's gonna get better weathering. And this is gonna just look better. It's just gonna look better. Please wash your clothes. Please. Like, there's so many different videos. I'll even put up some right here, like, of just different ways to wash vintage clothes or older clothes and stuff like that. Please. Okay, so my last few points is probably just focusing on the actual pros of vintage. And I really just wanted to add this section within the video, mainly because like I feel like this video may come off like as a negative towards vintage clothes, or just like vintage. Oh my god, that voice crack was crazy. Or just vintage referencing and everything like that. But I genuinely love vintage. Like, I feel like the more you get into fashion, or if you genuinely want to get into fashion, like actually looking at like older clothes, collecting older clothes, and just referencing older clothes, like as a designer yourself, or as like a creative who wants to get into like designing clothes and just this creative world, you either will or you genuinely have to like gain an not even just an understanding, just a basic understanding of vintage clothes, but just a general love for just older clothes. You don't gotta love like all the clothes with all the rips in them and everything. Like your shirt doesn't have to be ripped up with like literal holes that's been bit off by like some rat that was in some rag house that was running around pooping all on your clothes, and you have like 40 different like coffee stains on them and everything. You don't have to like be that crazy deep into like vintage clothes or anything, but you generally gain the actual love for the clothes and the garments because you understand that the thought process in which people got to that place in which to create those clothes is almost damn near unique to your thought process now today. It's cool when you look at stuff like that because it brings genuine history and like love and just like substance to fashion itself. That's why fashion is nothing without vintage, and that's why vintage will always carry fashion forward. The best designers know how to reference vintage well. It's like it's like creating a beat. It's like you the best fashion designers can chop up a beat like they do like that was about to be a bar. The best clothing designers know how to reference vintage clothes like Kanye references old tracks. When you look at a Kanye track and you see how he built up that track and how he referenced so many different versions of different songs from one version to another, he's speeding it up, he's slowing it down, he's doing this, he's chopping it up like 4 or 5 times and putting it together to make a whole different melody. The best designers are able to take vintage clothes and just make it new. And that's very important because what's new without the old? You can't know if something's new if you've never had something before. Okay, so yeah, that's my video. That's my take in my yap session on vintage fashion. Why I think it's overrated, overdone, overused, just in general. I don't think it's overrated. That's just clickbait. It's more like overused today, but it's still also sweet and good, and I just want to like sit in my room and yap, honestly. So yeah, thank y'all for listening. I don't know if this I'm on a mic which is recording on my computer right now, which is really cool. I like really doing videos like this, so it's really nice. I just don't always have like a quick idea in my head whenever I have the time to actually sit down and make these videos. So it's really cool. If you like my content or this video, leave a like, leave a comment down below if there's anything else you want me to yap about, which you define cool or whatever. In general, just have my love for just clothes in general. Like majority of these videos are about clothes, mainly because I love clothes. Like literally, I love clothes. I love fashion. It's so fun. I just want to get like more and more actually like deep into it. Like my next video might be a yap session about like my favorite band, Broader. Actually, no, I'm gonna do that. My next yap session is gonna be a video on Broader. That's gonna be my video. Hopefully I remember to do that. Hopefully, chat. Hopefully I'm pointing at y'all. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the end of the video. That's vibes. I'm gonna just chop this up and edit it, and you'll probably see it in like a few days. So yeah, deuces. Love ya.